Ambassador Zixatheta floated gracefully into the Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Council, his translucent body shimmering with anticipation. The massive hall buzzed with dozens of alien languages, each species communicating in their native tongues, while universal translators worked overtime. Today marked a historic moment, humanity's formal introduction to the galactic community. The Vorthon representative coiled his serpentine form around the speaker's podium, his scales clicking in amusement. "Fellow beings of the council," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber like rolling thunder. "Today we welcome the humans of Earth, a young species that has finally achieved faster-than-light travel." A ripple of condescending chuckles echoed through the assembly. The Krillians, with their crystalline bodies, vibrated in what passed for laughter among their kind. The warrior race of Thrakari drummed their four arms against their chest plates in mock celebration. To them, humanity was just another primitive species stumbling into the stars. Zixatheta observed the human delegation entering the chamber. 5 individuals in crisp blue uniforms walked with measured steps, their faces betraying no emotion. Leading them was Ambassador Sarah Chen, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the alien assembly. Behind her stood 4 others, 3 men and 1 woman, each carrying themselves with a peculiar rigidity that Zixatheta found curious. "Welcome, humans," the Vorthon continued, his forked tongue flicking out in what he believed was a friendly gesture. "You join a community of 847 civilized species. We have maintained peace in this galaxy for over 3,000 standard cycles." Ambassador Chen stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "We are honored to be here. Earth looks forward to peaceful cooperation with all member species." The Thrakari warlord, General Krax, stood abruptly. His massive frame cast shadows across several smaller delegates. "Peaceful cooperation," he growled, his translator struggling with the contempt in his voice. "Tell us, human, what does your species know of war?" Chen's expression remained neutral. "We have had our conflicts, but we've moved past them. We come here seeking knowledge and friendship." Laughter erupted from multiple sections of the assembly. The Zephyrians, beings of pure energy, flickered in patterns that indicated extreme amusement. Even the usually stoic mechanoids emitted sounds approximating chuckles. Moved past conflict? The Krillian ambassador's crystalline form rang like a bell. "How quaint. No doubt your wars consisted of throwing primitive projectiles at each other, perhaps some chemical explosives." "We have evolved beyond such things," Chen replied calmly. One of the humans behind her, a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped hair, shifted slightly. The movement was subtle, but Zixatheta noticed how the other humans immediately adjusted their positions in response. The Council's chief arbitrator, an ancient Etherian whose gaseous form swirled in a containment field, spoke with the authority of millennia. "Humans, you must understand that true galactic citizens have transcended primitive violence. The Thrakari, our most militant members, haven't engaged in actual warfare for 500 cycles. We settle disputes through negotiation, trade sanctions, and if necessary, controlled military exercises with strict rules of engagement." "We understand," Chen said. "Earth has no desire for conflict." General Krax laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "No desire? Or no capability? Tell me, human, what is your military strength? How many warships does Earth possess?" "Our defensive fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels," Chen answered. The laughter grew louder. The Vorthon delegates slithered in amusement. 200? The Krillian Mining Consortium has more ships than that. A proper military force requires thousands of vessels." "Quality over quantity," one of the humans behind Chen muttered. The comment was barely audible, but several species with enhanced hearing picked it up. "What was that?" Krax demanded, his 4 eyes focusing on the speaker, the same broad-shouldered man who had moved earlier. Chen shot a quick glance at her companion. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reynolds meant no disrespect. He simply believes that numbers aren't everything in defense." "Lieutenant Colonel?" The Zephyrian delegate pulsed with curiosity. "A military rank? You brought soldiers to a diplomatic meeting?" "The lieutenant colonel and his colleagues serve as my security detail," Chen explained. "Standard diplomatic protocol." Zix Theta studied the 4 humans standing behind the ambassador more carefully. They stood with an economy of motion, constantly scanning the room, their positions allowing them to observe multiple angles simultaneously. Their uniforms bore subtle insignia, an eagle perched on a globe with an anchor. Something about their bearing made his species' danger sense tingle. "Security detail," the mechanoid representative computed aloud. "Probability of hostile action in this chamber, 0.001%. Excessive caution indicates paranoid species profile." The Etherian leader waved a gaseous appendage dismissively. "Let us move past this. Humans, the Council offers you provisional membership. You will have access to basic trade routes and technologies. Full membership requires a probationary period of 100 cycles, during which you must prove your commitment to peaceful coexistence." "We accept these terms," Chen said. "However, we do have questions about the Council's mutual defense provisions." "Mutual defense?" The Vortan's scales rippled with incredulity. "What could humans possibly contribute to our defense? Your 200 ships?" "We prefer to understand all aspects of membership," Chen replied diplomatically. General Krax stepped down from his platform, his massive form causing the floor to vibrate. "Since you're so interested in military matters, perhaps a demonstration is in order. The Council holds regular war games, simulated battles to maintain readiness. Would Earth care to participate?" The human delegates exchanged glances. Reynolds leaned forward slightly and whispered something to Chen. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "We would be honored to observe," Chen said carefully. "Observe?" Krax's mandibles clicked in what might have been disappointment. "I thought you might participate. One of your vessels against one of ours. Simulated combat only, of course. All weapons powered down to training levels." "I would need to consult with Earth Command," Chen began, but Reynolds stepped forward. "Ma'am, if I may," he said quietly. Chen nodded. Reynolds addressed the assembly, his voice carrying despite its calm tone. "The USS Tempest is currently holding position just outside the system. Captain Sarah Martinez commands her. If the Council permits, she could participate in a limited exercise." Excitement rippled through the assembly. The prospect of seeing the primitive humans embarrassed in mock combat appealed to many species' sense of superiority. "Excellent!" Krax boomed. "I will personally command the Blade of Thrakar. We shall see what humans consider a warship." The Council quickly agreed to the impromptu demonstration. Viewing screens materialized throughout the chamber as delegates settled in to watch what most expected would be a quick and humiliating defeat for the newcomers. The Blade of Thrakar appeared on screen first. A massive vessel bristling with weapon ports, its hull adorned with victory markings from countless engagements. At 3 kilometers long, it dwarfed most ships in the known galaxy. Its specifications scrolled past: plasma cannons, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, shields rated for stellar-level impacts. Then the USS Tempest entered visual range. Confused murmurs filled the chamber. The human vessel was smaller than expected, barely 800 meters long. Its design seemed almost primitive, an angular, aggressive shape painted in dark gray that seemed to absorb light. No visible weapon ports dotted its hull, no proud markings proclaimed past victories. "That's a warship?" The Krillian delegate chimed in disbelief. "It looks like a cargo hauler." General Krax's voice boomed over the comm system. Human vessel, I offer you the chance to withdraw. There is no shame in acknowledging superior firepower. Captain Martinez's voice came through clear and professional. Negative, Blade of Thrakar. We're ready to proceed. Standard engagement rules? If you insist, Krax laughed. Combat zone is marked. First to achieve 3 confirmed hits wins. Weapons at 5% power. Begin on the signal. Zixatheta watched Reynolds and the other humans. They showed no concern, no worry. If anything, Reynolds had a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The woman next to him, her uniform identified her as Gunnery Sergeant Kim, was watching the tactical display with intense focus. The signal flashed. The Blade of Thrakar surged forward, its engines blazing with power that would have torn lesser ships apart. Plasma cannons swiveled, targeting computers locked on, and a full spread of training torpedoes launched toward the Tempest. The human ship didn't move. Gasps filled the chamber as the torpedoes closed distance. At the last possible second, the Tempest simply shifted. The vessel moved in ways that defied conventional understanding of inertia and mass. It danced between the torpedoes with millimeter precision, not one scoring a hit. Impossible, the mechanoid calculated. Maneuvers exceed theoretical limits of mass acceleration ratios. Then the Tempest returned fire. No one saw weapons deploy. There were no glowing energy beams, no visible projectiles. The Blade of Thrakar's shield simply flared and died. 3 precise impacts registered on the scoring system before anyone fully processed what had happened. Match concluded, the automated referee system announced. Victory to USS Tempest. Stunned silence gripped the assembly. General Krax's voice crackled over comms, confusion evident despite the translator. What? How? Our shields didn't even register incoming fire until impact. Captain Martinez responded calmly. Magnetic acceleration weapons, General. Projectiles traveling at appreciable fractions of light speed. Your shields are configured for energy weapons and slower-moving torpedoes. Projectiles? Krax sputtered. You use primitive kinetic weapons? There's nothing primitive about a tungsten rod moving at 20% the speed of light, Martinez replied. Though these were training rounds, polymer shells designed to register hits without penetrating. The assembly erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations. The humans had used weapons so basic that modern shields weren't even calibrated to stop them effectively, yet deployed with a sophistication that defied understanding. Zixatheta noticed Ambassador Chen lean over to Reynolds. Was that really necessary? She whispered. Reynolds shrugged slightly. They asked for a demonstration, ma'am. We gave them barely a glimpse. A glimpse? Chen's eyes widened slightly. The Tempest is a frigate, ma'am. The smallest combat vessel in the fleet. Captain Martinez used only the point defense railguns, not the main spinal mount. And she kept the stealth systems offline. They could see us the whole time. The Etherian leader called for order, its gaseous form roiling with agitation. This is highly irregular. Kinetic weapons are barbaric. No civilized species uses them. Chen stood, her diplomatic mask firmly in place. With respect, the Council asked for a demonstration of our defensive capabilities. We showed you one small aspect. Our weapons may be different from yours, but they are effective. Different is an understatement, the Vorthon delegate hissed. What other surprises does humanity hide? Before Chen could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The massive view screens that had shown the mock battle flickered and changed, displaying a sight that sent waves of fear through the assembly. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, dozens, then hundreds, sleek, predatory vessels that radiated menace despite their unknown configuration. As the Council's sensors struggled to identify them, one thing became clear. These weren't friendly visitors. The Devourers, someone whispered in terror. The Devourers, a nomadic species that stripped entire systems of resources, leaving dead worlds in their wake. They hadn't been seen in this sector for over a century, but their reputation preceded them. The Council's combined fleet had barely driven them off last time, suffering massive casualties in the process. "All Council military vessels to defensive positions," the Etherian commanded, its usual calm shattered. "Activate all reserve fleets. Send distress calls to neighboring sectors." General Crax's image appeared on screen, his earlier arrogance replaced by grim determination. "Council forces report ready. 60 warships in system, another 200 en route, but at their current approach speed, we'll be outnumbered 3-1 before reinforcements arrive," the mechanoid completed. Zixa Theta turned to observe the human delegation. Ambassador Chen was in rapid conversation with Reynolds and his team. The lieutenant colonel had produced a communication device and was speaking urgently into it. The other 3 humans had shifted position, forming a protective detail around their ambassador while simultaneously watching the tactical displays with professional interest. "Ambassador Chen," the Etherian leader called out, "your ship should retreat immediately. The Tempest cannot hope to survive what's coming." Chen looked up from her discussion. "The Tempest will remain on station." "One small vessel cannot make a difference," the Vorthan protested. "Save yourselves." Reynolds stepped forward. "Your Excellency, Ambassador Chen has authorized me to speak on military matters. The Tempest won't be alone. Your 200 ships cannot reach here in time," General Crax interjected from his command center. "No," Reynolds agreed. "They can't." Something in his tone made the entire assembly pause. There was no fear in his voice. No concern. If anything, there was a hint of anticipation. "However," Reynolds continued, "it happens that the 31st Marine Expeditionary Force is conducting training exercises 3 systems over. They can be here within the hour." "One of your military units?" The Krillian delegate's form rang with skepticism. "How many ships?" Reynolds glanced at his communication device. "The 31st MEF consists of 12 vessels, sir." Laughter, nervous and disbelieving, rippled through the chamber. 12 ships? The Devourers approach with over 300. "Yes, sir," Reynolds acknowledged. "About battalion strength for them. Should be interesting." The casual assessment sent chills through several species. Zixa Theta moved closer, his curiosity overcoming caution. "Lieutenant Colonel, you seem remarkably calm about facing a force that has terrorized this sector for generations." Reynolds met his gaze steadily. "Sir, with respect, you asked what humanity knows of war. The answer is simple. We know everything about it. We studied it, perfected it, and then chose to contain it. The Devourers are about to learn why." On the tactical display, the Devourer fleet continued its approach, confident in their overwhelming numbers. The Council forces formed defensive lines, their formations textbook perfect, but tinged with the desperation of those who knew the odds. And somewhere in hyperspace, 12 human vessels carrying the 31st Marine Expeditionary Force changed course, their crews preparing for what they did best. The galaxy was about to receive its first real lesson in human warfare. The Galactic Council's defensive line stretched across the void like a glittering wall of metal and energy. 60 ships held formation, their shields interlocked in standard Council doctrine. Against 300 Devourer vessels, the mathematics were simple and brutal. General Crax stood on the bridge of the Blade of Thrakar, his 4 arms dancing across tactical displays. His earlier humiliation at the hands of the Tempest was forgotten in the face of annihilation. "All ships, maintain formation, concentrate fire on their lead elements, make them pay for every meter." The Devourers came on like a plague of metal locusts. Their ships were crude compared to Council standards. Bulky, utilitarian vessels designed for one purpose: strip mining entire civilizations. They didn't need elegance. They had numbers and ruthlessness. In the Council chamber, delegates watched in growing horror as the first exchanges of fire lit up the void. Council weapons, beautiful lances of coherent energy and sophisticated antimatter weapons splashed against the Devourer's thick armor and redundant shields. Return fire was less elegant, but brutally effective. Mass drivers, nuclear missiles, and crude plasma cutters that could core a ship like an apple. 15% casualties in the first wave, the mechanoid reported emotionlessly. Devourer losses, minimal. Zix Theta floated near the human delegation, watching their reactions. Ambassador Chen maintained her diplomatic composure, but her hands gripped the railing tightly. The Marines, however, watched the tactical display with professional interest, occasionally murmuring observations to each other. Their attack pattern is predictable, Gunnery Sergeant Kim noted quietly. Mass concentration on perceived weak points, no finesse. Swarm tactics, Reynolds agreed, overwhelmed through numbers and firepower, effective against static defenses. A council cruiser exploded on the screen, its elegant form consumed by nuclear fire. Gasps and cries of distress filled the chamber. The Zephyrian delegate's energy form flickered erratically. "Where are your reinforcements, humans? Your 12 ships?" 20 minutes out, Reynolds checked his device. "They're pushing their drives hard." 20 minutes? The Vorthan scales were pale with fear. "The line won't hold that long." As if to emphasize the point, the Devourers executed a flanking maneuver, sending 50 ships around the Council's right flank. General Krax tried to compensate, but his forces were too few, too spread out. The defensive line began to buckle. "Fall back to secondary positions," Krax ordered, his voice strained. "All ships, fighting retreat. Make them work for it." The USS Tempest had been holding position near the Council line, its captain wisely avoiding direct engagement with the massed Devourer fleet. Now, as Council ships began their retreat, the small human frigate suddenly accelerated. "Tempest, what are you doing?" Krax demanded. "Fall back with the fleet." Captain Martinez's voice was calm. "Negative, General. We're going to buy you some time. Executing attack run." "One ship against hundreds? That's suicide!" The Tempest didn't respond with words. Instead, it vanished. Confusion reigned for several seconds before ships started exploding in the Devourer formation. 3, then 5, then a dozen vessels simply detonated from within, their hulls cracking like eggs. The Tempest reappeared on the far side of the enemy formation, its stealth systems disengaging. "How?" The Krillian delegate chimed in disbelief. "We couldn't track it at all." "Stealth technology," Reynolds explained, pride evident in his voice. "And those weren't external hits. The Tempest deployed hunter-killer drones during its pass, microscopic boring charges that seek out power cores." The Devourer fleet reeled from the unexpected attack, their formation disrupted. It bought precious minutes for the Council forces to regroup, but the respite was temporary. The Devourers adapted quickly, their sensors recalibrating, their formations spreading to minimize similar attacks. "Tempest is being targeted by multiple vessels." The tactical display showed dozens of Devourer ships converging on the lone frigate. "She can't evade them all." Then reality tore open. Hyperspace exits were typically elegant affairs, ships sliding gracefully from one dimension to another. What happened next was anything but elegant. 12 rifts in space-time ripped open simultaneously, disgorging vessels that seemed to bring pieces of hell with them. The ships of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Force didn't look like warships. They looked like predators. Where Council vessels were works of art and Devourer ships were crude tools, these were something else entirely. Pure function married to lethal intent. The lead ship was massive, not in the way of the Blade of Thrakar's grand design, but with a brutal efficiency that spoke of singular purpose. The USS Iwo Jima, according to the transponder signals. An assault carrier, though that term hardly did justice to what the Council was witnessing. "This is Colonel Alexandra Stone, commanding the 31st MEF." A woman's voice cut through all communication channels with crystal clarity. Council forces withdraw to bearing 27 Mark 4. Tempest, nice work. We'll take it from here. General Cracks, veteran of 100 conflicts, found himself automatically obeying the authority in that voice. All council ships, new defensive position as indicated. Colonel Stone, the Etherian leader interjected from the council chamber, 12 ships cannot hope to stop 300. We appreciate your assistance, but perhaps a coordinated retreat. With respect. Sir, Stone cut him off. We're not here to retreat. We're here to demonstrate why you don't attack protected space. All MEF units, weapons free. Time to go to work. What followed challenged everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about space warfare. The Marine ships didn't form elegant battle lines. They scattered, each vessel becoming a lethal island of firepower. Where the Tempest had used finesse and stealth, the Marines brought overwhelming violence. The USS Belleau Wood, a destroyer by human classification, dove straight into the heart of a Devourer squadron. Kinetic weapons spoke in voices of thunder, hypersonic tungsten penetrators punching through shields and armor as if they were tissue paper. Point defense systems created walls of metal that shredded incoming missiles, while electronic warfare suites turned enemy targeting computers into expensive scrap. Their shields don't stop solid projectiles effectively, Kim observed, watching her fellow Marines work. Energy weapons are sophisticated, but sometimes simple is better. Simple? The Vorthan delegate had slithered closer, drawn by horrified fascination. They're throwing metal at significant fractions of light speed. The energy requirements alone are considerable, Reynolds agreed, but we've had centuries to perfect the technology. The assault carrier Iwo Jima disgorged something that made the council delegates recoil. Hundreds of smaller craft erupted from its launch bays, not fighters in any conventional sense, but something far more terrifying. Drop pods, Reynolds identified them with a smile. Each one carries a squad of Marines in powered armor. They're boarding Devourer ships in the middle of a battle? Zix Theta couldn't hide his amazement. Standard Marine doctrine. Why destroy a ship when you can take it? The tactical display showed red icons blinking out across the Devourer fleet, not destroyed but neutralized. Ships began drifting, their command systems compromised, their crews presumably dealing with armored humans who had decided to make house calls. The Devourers tried to adapt. They pulled back, attempting to regroup, to bring their numerical advantage to bear. It was like watching a swarm of insects try to overwhelm a pride of lions. Every time they massed for an attack, a Marine vessel would strike at the concentration with devastating effect. The USS Tarawa demonstrated why human electronic warfare was feared even by those who'd never encountered it. Devourer ships began firing on each other, their IFF systems compromised, their communications networks turned into weapons against them. Chaos spread through their ranks like a virus. They're not fighting a battle, the mechanoid observed, its analytical processes struggling to keep up. They're dissecting the enemy force. Welcome to human warfare, Reynolds said quietly. We don't just defeat enemies, we break them. Utterly. A Devourer dreadnought, easily 10 times the mass of any Marine vessel, tried to break through to attack the council ships. The USS Okinawa, half its size, met it head-on. The human ship's main gun spoke once, a spinal-mounted mass driver that ran the entire length of the vessel. The tungsten sabot, moving at 25% the speed of light, didn't just penetrate the dreadnought. It deleted the central third of the ship from existence. Overkill, someone whispered. No such thing in Marine vocabulary, Sergeant Thompson commented, speaking for the first time. You don't stop hitting until the enemy stops moving, then you hit them once more to be sure. The Devourer fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming just minutes before, was collapsing. Ships fled in all directions, their coordination shattered, their will broken. Those that couldn't flee surrendered, powering down weapons and shields rather than face-boarding parties or kinetic annihilation. But the Marines weren't finished. "Running isn't an option," Colonel Stone's voice carried across the chaos. "You came here to devour. Now you face the consequences. All units, pursuit pattern Delta. No one leaves this system." The 12 Marine vessels split into hunting packs, their drives flaring as they gave chase. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Fleeing devourer ships were run down with mechanical precision, disabled or destroyed based on some criteria the Council couldn't fathom. In the Council chamber, delegates watched in stunned silence as 300 ships were reduced to drifting hulks or expanding clouds of debris in less than 30 minutes. The human Marines had taken one of the most feared forces in the galaxy and dismantled it like a training exercise. How? The Etherian leader's gaseous form roiled with emotions its species rarely displayed. "How is this possible?" Ambassador Chen stepped forward, her diplomatic mask cracking slightly to show the steel beneath. "Your Excellency asked what humanity knows of war. The truth is, we know it too well. We've fought wars that killed billions. We've created weapons that could crack planets. We've turned warfare into a science so refined that we scared ourselves." "So you contained it," Zixatheta said, understanding beginning to dawn. "We contained it," Chen confirmed. "We chose to explore, to build, to join the galactic community as peaceful neighbors. But we never forgot how to fight. We simply chose not to." On the display, the last Devourer ship was being boarded. Colonel Stone's image appeared on the main screen, her scarred face set in grim satisfaction. "Council representatives, the immediate threat has been neutralized. We're transferring prisoners to our detention facilities for interrogation and processing." "Colonel," General Crack spoke, his earlier arrogance completely absent. "The Council owes you a debt." "No debt," Stone replied. "We protect our own. Earth stands with the Council. But understand this, what you saw today was a small expeditionary force dealing with a minor threat. Pray you never see what humanity looks like when we actually go to war." Reynolds leaned over to Chen. "Ma'am, think we made our point?" Chen watched the delegations around them. Beings who had laughed at humanity's military capabilities now looked at them with a mixture of awe and fear. "Perhaps too well, Colonel." "The Devourers," the Krillian delegate chimed weakly. "They've terrorized this sector for generations. You destroyed them in minutes." "We didn't destroy them," Kim corrected. "We harvested them. Their technology will be studied. Their resources redistributed to their victims. Their surviving personnel given the choice of rehabilitation or imprisonment. Waste not, want not." The Etherian leader called for order, its form still agitated. "This changes everything. Humanity's membership in the Council remains as we discussed," Chen interrupted smoothly. "We seek peaceful cooperation. What happened today was a response to aggression, nothing more. We have no desire to conquer or dominate." "But you could," the Vorthan stated, not questioning but acknowledging a new reality. "Yes," Chen agreed simply. "We could, but we won't. That's what makes us human. We have the capacity for terrible violence, but we choose peace, until someone forces us to choose otherwise." The Council chamber fell silent again, each species processing what they'd witnessed. The humans had revealed themselves not as the primitive newcomers everyone expected, but as possibly the most dangerous species in the galaxy, made more terrifying by their restraint. Colonel Stone's image spoke once more. "Council representatives, we'll remain in system for 72 hours to ensure no Devourer stragglers remain. After that, the 31st MEF will return to our training exercises. If you need us again, you know how to reach us." As the connection closed, Reynolds turned to observe the assembled delegates. Where once they'd looked at humanity with condescension, now there was respect mixed with healthy fear. "Questions?" he asked mildly. The chamber erupted with hundreds of them. How had humanity developed such weapons? How many more ships did they have? What other technologies did they possess? Were all humans trained for war like the Marines? Chen raised a hand for silence. "We'll be happy to discuss defensive partnerships and technology-sharing agreements. But understand that humanity's military capabilities are not for sale or exploitation. We'll defend the innocent, protect our allies, and maintain peace. But we will never again be anyone's victims." "The Marines?" General Krax asked carefully. "How many such forces does Earth maintain?" Reynolds and his team exchanged glances. "The United States Marines are one of several military branches from one of Earth's nations. The 31st MEF is one of many such units." One nation? One of many units? The implications sent ripples of unease through the chamber. "Earth maintains its defensive readiness," Chen said diplomatically. "We hope never to use it. But as today demonstrated, we're prepared if necessary." Zix Theta found himself studying the humans with new respect. They had walked into this chamber appearing as primitives playing at being civilized. In reality, they were apex predators who had chosen to sheath their claws. The tactical display showed the aftermath of the battle. 12 Marine ships moved among the wreckage with purpose, collecting prisoners, salvaging technology, and ensuring no threats remained. They worked with an efficiency that spoke of long practice, turning the battlefield into a classroom for future engagements. "What happens now?" the Etherian leader asked, its ancient wisdom grappling with this paradigm shift. "Now," Chen said, "we continue as planned. Earth joins the Galactic Council. We contribute to peaceful development, share appropriate technologies, and help build a better galaxy for all species. What happened today doesn't change our intentions." "But it changes everything else," the Vorthan observed. "Perhaps," Chen allowed, "but change isn't always negative. The Council has maintained peace through negotiation and economic pressure. Now you have another option. The certainty that aggression will be met with decisive response. Sometimes the best deterrent to war is the absolute certainty of defeat." The Marines behind her stood straighter, if that was possible. They were no longer just a security detail. They were representatives of a force that had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare in 30 minutes. Reynolds caught Zix Theta's attention. "You asked what humanity knows of war. The answer is everything: its cost, its horror, its necessity when all else fails. We've paid that price in blood and tears across centuries. Now we use that knowledge to prevent others from paying the same price." "And if someone refuses to be deterred?" Zix Theta asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Reynolds smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then they learn why humanity's first rule of warfare is simple. Don't start what you can't finish, because we always finish what others start." The council session continued, but the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Humanity was no longer a curiosity, a primitive species to be patronized. They were revealed as guardians who had chosen peace but never forgotten war. And in the void outside, 12 ships of the 31st Marine Expeditionary Force continued their grim work, a reminder that some choices, once made, echo across the stars. 3 months had passed since the Devourer incident. The Galactic Council operated differently now, subtle changes that spoke volumes. Military delegations included humans observers. Defense planning sessions eagerly sought Earth's input. The condescension was gone, replaced by wary respect. Ambassador Chen sat in her office aboard the council station, reviewing trade agreements when her secure communicator chimed. The face that appeared made her straighten immediately. "Admiral Patterson," she acknowledged. The head of Earth's Combined Fleet Command rarely made social calls. "Sarah, we have a situation. I need Reynolds and his team in the secure conference room, 10 minutes. Chen found the Marines in the station's recreation facility, where they'd been conducting what they called cultural exchange, teaching interested aliens human military history through tactical simulations. Currently, a group of young Krillians were attempting to understand something called the Battle of Thermopylae. "Time to go," Chen said quietly. Reynolds took one look at her face and nodded. In the secure room, Admiral Patterson's hologram waited alongside several other human military leaders. Chen recognized General Morrison from the Army, Air Force General Lopez, and someone she didn't know in an unmarked uniform. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patterson began without preamble, 40 minutes ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected gravitational anomalies consistent with massive hyperspace translations. Something big is coming, and it's not friendly. The unmarked officer spoke up. "Intelligence suggests this is the hegemony." Even Reynolds stiffened at that name. The hegemony, a vast empire from the galaxy's far rim that consumed civilizations wholesale. They were legend even to the Council, a boogeyman story told to frighten younger species. "How many ships?" Reynolds asked. "Conservative estimate? 50,000, possibly more." Chen felt her blood chill. The entire Council fleet numbers less than 10,000 vessels. "Which is why we're having this conversation," Patterson said grimly. "The President and Joint Chiefs have authorized Prometheus Protocol." The Marines exchanged glances. Kim whispered, "They're actually going to do it." "What's Prometheus Protocol?" Chen asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Patterson's expression was stone. "Full military activation. Everything we've kept in reserve. The Council is about to learn that what they've seen of human military might is barely a fraction of our capability." "The 31st MEF impressed them," Reynolds said slowly. "This might terrify them more than the enemy." "Can't be helped," General Morrison interjected. "Initial hegemony scouts will reach Council space in 72 hours. Their main fleet arrives in a week. We either show our hand or watch the galaxy burn." Chen made her decision. "I need to inform the Council leadership. They deserve to know what's coming, both the threat and our response." "Agreed," Patterson nodded. "Reynolds, your team will coordinate with incoming forces. Time to dust off the real playbooks." An hour later, Chen stood before an emergency session of the Council. Every member species was represented, the chamber thick with fear as news of the hegemony's approach spread. 50,000 ships, the Etherian leader's form wavered with distress. "The hegemony hasn't moved in force for millennia. Why now?" "Our analysis suggests the Devourer defeat caught their attention," Chen explained. "The hegemony maintains order through fear. A new player defeating one of their proxy forces demands response." General Krax slammed his fists on his podium. "Then humanity has doomed us all. Your display of force brought this upon us." "No," Chen's voice cut through the rising panic. "The hegemony would have come eventually, they always do. But now you have something you didn't before." "What?" the Vorthon demanded. "Hope against 50,000 ships?" "Allies who know how to fight them." The chamber erupted. Questions, accusations, and pleas for clarification filled the air. Chen waited for quiet, then activated a holographic display. "Earth's government has authorized me to reveal classified information. What you've seen of our military, the Tempest, the 31st MEF, represents our peacekeeping forces, small units designed for limited engagement." "Small units?" The Krillian's chime was discordant with disbelief. "They annihilated 300 ships." "Yes," Chen agreed. "Small units. What's coming now is our actual military." The display shifted, showing star charts marked with red icons. Hundreds, then thousands of indicators appeared across human space and beyond. For the past century, while engaging in peaceful exploration and trade, humanity has also been preparing. We've studied every major threat in galactic history. We've developed counters to technologies we've never seen. We've built a military infrastructure designed for one purpose, preventing our extinction or the extinction of our allies. New images appeared. Ships that dwarfed even the Iwo Jima, orbital installations that could crack moons, fighter craft numbered in the millions, and more disturbing, empty shells in space, vast constructs that served purposes the Council couldn't identify. What are those? The mechanoid focused on the mysterious structures. Chen glanced at Reynolds, who nodded. Stasis fields. Each contains a full fleet in temporal suspension. Crews and ships frozen at the moment of peak readiness, waiting for activation. We call them cemetery fleets, because they wake when everything else is dead. Horrified silence greeted this revelation. The Etherian leader finally spoke. How many? Classified, Chen said apologetically. But sufficient. Sufficient for what? For war on a scale you've never imagined, Reynolds interjected. The hegemony thinks in terms of fleets and sectors. Humans think in terms of total war. They're about to learn the difference. 3 days later, hegemony scouts entered Council space. 20 sleek vessels, each the size of a Council battleship, swept through the outer systems with impunity. They broadcast messages of impending conquest, promising mercy to those who surrendered immediately. The Council fleet, bolstered by human advisors, held position near the core worlds. General Krax commanded from his flagship with Reynolds and a team of Marines providing tactical support. Why aren't we engaging? Krax demanded, watching the scouts probe defenses. Because they're scouts, Reynolds explained patiently. You don't SWAT scouts. You let them report back exactly what you want the enemy to know. Which is, Reynolds smiled coldly, that the Council is alone, frightened, and preparing a last desperate stand at the core worlds. The hegemony will commit their full force for a decisive victory. That's insane. That's strategy. Admiral Patterson calls it aggressive stupidity, appearing weaker than you are to invite overconfidence. The scouts eventually withdrew, presumably racing back to report the Council's vulnerability. Krax turned to Reynolds. When will your forces arrive? They won't. What? The general's 4 eyes widened in shock. You're abandoning us? No, Reynolds checked his chronometer. They're already here. Have been for 2 days. You just can't see them. Before Krax could demand clarification, space erupted. The first sign was gravitational anomalies, the same signatures that had heralded the hegemony's approach, but orders of magnitude larger. Reality seemed to protest as hyperspace was torn open in wounds that bled ships. Cemetery Fleet 7 emerged first. 1,000 vessels transitioning from temporal stasis to full combat readiness in seconds. Ships that had been frozen at the height of human military power, their crews fresh and eager despite decades of suspension. Then came active fleets, the Third Solar Navy, the Mars Defense Armada, the Colonial Guard, names that meant nothing to the Council but everything to humanity. Ships poured into real space in formations that spoke of long practice and terrible purpose. But the ships were just the beginning. Stellar engineering platforms materialized, massive constructs that immediately began deploying. Within hours, they'd created artificial gravity wells, turning hyperspace lanes into death traps. Minefields measured in astronomical units sprouted like lethal gardens. Automated defense platforms powered by captive stars flickered to life. How? The Etherian leader's voice reached them over comms, awestruck and terrified in equal measure. The energy requirements, the coordination. Chen, monitoring from the council chamber, answered simply. We've been preparing for over a century. Every human colony, every mining operation, every research station, they all served dual purposes. We built a civilization ready for war while showing you only peace. The numbers were staggering. Where the Council had feared facing 50,000 hegemony ships with 10,000 defenders, now over 100,000 human vessels filled the void. And they kept coming. Admiral Patterson's flagship, the dreadnought Prometheus, emerged at the center of the formation. The ship was a monument to human paranoia. 5 kilometers of armor, weapons, and shields that could withstand stellar impacts. Its main gun was rumored to fire miniature black holes. "All Council forces," Patterson's voice carried absolute authority. "Withdraw to designated safe zones. What comes next isn't for the faint of heart." Krax found himself obeying without question. The Council fleet pulled back, leaving the field to humanity's assembled might. The hegemony arrived exactly on schedule. Their massive fleet, confident in numerical superiority and thousands of years of dominance, translated into what they expected to be a slaughter. They found hell waiting. The first wave of hegemony ships ran into the gravity traps. Hyperspace exits became death sentences as ships materialized inside artificial singularities or found themselves shunted into kill zones where thousands of human weapons waited. Those that survived the initial trap faced humanity's true military doctrine. Where the Marines had been surgical, this was brutality on an industrial scale. Mass driver batteries fired continuously, filling space with relativistic death. Energy weapons that drew power directly from stars burned through shields like tissue. Missiles carrying antimatter warheads turned ship formations into miniature supernovas. But it was the fighters that truly shocked both sides. Millions of them, pouring from carriers and hidden bases. Unlike Council fighters that prioritized pilot safety, human designs were pure weapon platforms. Their pilots, volunteers all, flew with the kind of desperate fury that only those defending their homes could muster. "They're using kamikaze tactics," someone in the Council chamber gasped, as human fighters rammed hegemony capital ships, their fusion cores detonating on impact. "No," Reynolds corrected from Krax's bridge. "Kamikaze implies desperation. This is calculated sacrifice. Every pilot knows exactly what their death will achieve." The hegemony tried to adapt, to use their vast experience in conquest, but they'd never faced an enemy like humanity, one that had turned warfare into science, art, and religion combined. Every tactic they employed had been anticipated, planned for, countered in advance. Worse for the hegemony, humanity didn't fight like the Council. There were no elegant duels, no concern for minimizing casualties. Human commanders threw away entire fleets to achieve tactical advantages, confident in their reserves. They turned stellar bodies into weapons, detonating gas giants to create system-wide firestorms. They deployed weapons that violated every civilized convention of warfare. "Bioweapons!" the mechanoid reported in horror as hegemony ships began losing power, their organic components consumed by engineered plagues. "Nanotech swarms! Temporal distortion fields! These weapons are abominations!" "Yes," Admiral Patterson's voice carried no apology. "They are. That's why we classified them, locked them away, and prayed we'd never need them. But when faced with extinction, humans don't fight fair. We fight to win." 6 hours into the battle, the hegemony's inevitable victory had become impossible defeat. Their fleet was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that fought without rules, without mercy, and without pause. Human ships damaged beyond repair turned themselves into weapons, ramming enemies or detonating in spectacular suicide runs. Wounded human soldiers in powered armor continued fighting even in hard vacuum, boarding enemy vessels with their last breath. The breaking point came when humanity deployed its most terrible weapon. "What's happening to their ships?" Krax pointed at hegemony vessels that were simply stopping. Not destroyed, not damaged, just frozen. "Stasis weapons," Reynolds explained quietly. "We trap them in temporal bubbles. From their perspective, no time passes. They're locked in a single moment forever, a fate worse than death, eternal imprisonment in an instant of defeat." The Hegemony Supreme Commander, watching his fleet die around him, broadcast a message on all frequencies. "We yield! The Hegemony yields! Terms! We seek terms!" Admiral Patterson's response was immediate and cold. "Unconditional surrender! All weapons powered down! All shields lowered! Any ship that doesn't comply in 30 seconds will be considered hostile." It took only 20 seconds for every surviving Hegemony vessel to comply. In the council chamber, delegates watched in stunned silence as humanity's vast fleet began the process of collecting prisoners and salvage. The greatest threat in galactic history had been broken in less than a day. "You could conquer the galaxy," the Vorthon whispered. "Nothing could stop you." Chen stood, addressing the assembled council with humanity's truth. "Yes, we could, but conquest was never our goal. We didn't build this military to rule. We built it to ensure we'd never be ruled. The difference matters." "What happens now?" the Etherian leader asked. "With such power?" "Now we do what humans do best," Chen smiled sadly. "We rebuild. The Hegemony's former subjects will be freed. Their technology will be shared among peaceful species. Their warships will be converted to colony vessels and explorers. We'll help the galaxy heal from their tyranny." "And your fleet?" "Will return to storage. The cemetery fleets will sleep again. Our active forces will reduce to peacekeeping levels. The weapons we deployed today will be locked away, hopefully forever, because that's what separates us from the Hegemony. We know when to stop." Reynolds rejoined them later, looking exhausted despite the victory. "The Admiral sends his regards. Hegemony leadership is in custody. Their empire is effectively dissolved." "The cost?" Chen asked quietly. 18,000 human vessels lost. Over 2 million personnel." The number staggered the council delegates, but Chen and Reynolds simply nodded. They'd expected worse. 2 million dead to save the galaxy," General Crack said slowly. "Your species' capacity for sacrifice—" "Everyone was a volunteer," Reynolds cut him off. "Every human in our military knows the price and chooses to pay it. Not for glory or conquest, but so others don't have to. That's what you never understood about us. We don't fear war. We fear what we become during it. So we end it as quickly and decisively as possible." In the days that followed, as the galaxy adjusted to its new reality, humanity kept its promises. The vast fleets disappeared as quickly as they'd arrived, returning to hidden bases and stasis storage. The terrible weapons were locked away under seals that would take unanimous human consent to break. Earth's representatives returned to trade negotiations and cultural exchanges as if they hadn't just revealed themselves as the galaxy's supreme military power. But things had changed. The Council no longer debated humanity's membership. It was approved unanimously and with considerable enthusiasm. Defense treaties were signed without hesitation. Trade flowed freely, with human technology carefully shared to uplift rather than dominate. A year later, Zixitheta visited Earth as part of a diplomatic mission. He found a world of contradictions, cities devoted to art and science, monuments to peace and cooperation, but also memorials to countless wars, training grounds where soldiers still prepared, and hidden installations where unimaginable weapons waited in darkness. He met Reynolds at one such memorial, a simple wall covered in names. "These are just from our last World War," Reynolds explained. "Before we reached the stars, hundreds of millions dead. It's why we are what we are. We've seen what happens when warfare becomes total, so we made ourselves capable of ending any war quickly. Better to be feared for a day than to fight for years." "Your species terrifies me," Zixitheta admitted. "But I think I understand. You became monsters so others wouldn't have to." Reynolds nodded slowly. "And we pray every day that we never have to prove it again. But if someone threatens our friends, our allies, our vision of a peaceful galaxy—" He trailed off, looking at the memorial. "We'll do what's necessary. Always." As they stood there, Zixatheta realized the greatest truth about humanity. They hadn't conquered the galaxy not because they couldn't, but because they chose not to. They stood guard against the darkness, weapons in hand, but hoping never to use them. The Galactic Council had thought humans feared war. They were wrong. Humans understood war so completely that they'd transcended it, becoming its masters rather than its servants. And in that mastery, they'd found the strength to choose peace. But gods help anyone who forced them to choose otherwise.